Hey, Mike, you ever heard that hymn that GK Chesterton wrote?
I'm scared.
No, he really did. He wrote it's called A Hymn, and he wrote it. And it's a
No.
beautiful poem. But what if it was sung in a black church?
Oh no.
GK Chester Soul. It's AI. It's so weird.
It's gonna do a long intro.
Yeah, it's getting in the spirit.
Oh, God of earth and altar, bow down and hear our cry. Our earthly rulers falter. Our people drift and die. Walls of gold.
So apparently, you can hear this. There's a real hymn. People sing in hymnals. People sing this.
The swords of scorn.
There's music to it, yeah, but it's like very hymny.
Take not the thunder.
I'm enjoying this actually.
Okay.
So this is just the.
But take away.
He's playing the saxophone and try to mention different gospel choir prompts.
That's cool. I like that.
From all that terror teaches.
That one is
Welcome to another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan, Nicolle and Michael Grumbine and me, AI Chesterton. Now testify, brothers and sisters. Can I get a witness?
From all these
Can I get a witness?
speeches
Somehow it doesn't sound the same coming from a British accent.
that comfort cruel men.
Right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
From sale
All
and profanation.
All right, we're on the third part of Suicide of Thought. On we go, the Suicide of Thought. So here we go. Diving back in. Buckle your chester belts.
You want me to say a word before?
Yeah, go for it. You got to.
So the last part. We in part 2 of this Suicide of Thought, we covered Chesterton did a real quick knockdown of 5 different errors that he sees as related to the suicide of thought. And the suicide of thought is the thought which prevents further thought. So
yeah.
he sees these as all very disturbing errors in their own way. So he first knocks down skeptics, and then evolutionary materialists, then this weird system by H.G. Wells I call the Wells weirdness. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've never heard anyone use it before, but anyway, he knocks that down on the way. Progressivism, and then pragmatism. So he's just gone through all 5 of those, and now he's going to fix his attention upon it with greater time spent, not just in a couple paragraphs each. He's going to fix his attention on the very popular Nietzschean will to power idea, which developed by Friedrich Nietzsche. So
I hear that was popular back then in the, especially around the 40s, World War II.
Well, it was yeah, exactly. Well, the Nazis had a hand in that. You're right. But even before that, it was very avant-garde in the early 20th century, before even World War I. So
yeah, I think of all the the USSR, like communism in Russia, Japan. Just felt like everybody was thinking, we're gonna take over the world here.
Yep, and an insane German was the one that came up with their philosophy that they all use. And I say that because he died of insanity.
You mean Nietzsche, not Hitler?
I mean Nietzsche. Yeah. And then Hitler took the baton.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, this first paragraph is broken up into 2 pieces. So here's the first piece.
One more word must be added. At the beginning of this preliminary negative sketch, I said that our mental ruin has been wrought by wild reason, not by wild imagination. A man does not go mad because he makes a statue a mile high, but he may go mad by thinking it out in square inches. Now one school of thinkers has seen this and jumped at it as a way of renewing the pagan health of the world. They see that reason destroys, but will, they say, creates. The ultimate authority, they say, is in will, not in reason. The supreme point is not why a man demands a thing, but the fact that he does demand it. I have no space to trace or expound this philosophy of will. It came, I suppose, through Nietzsche, who preached something that is called egoism, that indeed was simple-minded enough. For Nietzsche denied egoism simply by preaching it. To preach anything is to give it away. First, the egoist calls life a war without mercy, and then he takes the greatest possible trouble to drill his enemies in war. To preach egoism is to practice altruism.
So let me try to explain what I think he just said, and like dumb guys speak, and you explain to me if I'm right or wrong. Is he kind of saying like it doesn't make sense if you're preaching egoism, which is like you exert your power over everybody and you just try to get all the power you can. It doesn't make sense to like selflessly preach your point of view and like help everybody raise themselves up. Like if it's true, you wouldn't do that. If that's your religion, if your religion doesn't have any altruism in it, why are you being altruistic? Why are you helping everybody out? Is that what he's saying?
Exactly. Yeah, that's the heart of it. Nietzsche purported to come up with a philosophy that was all about just the self and the will to power for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then he proceeded to give away the secrets, so to speak, and about his own philosophy, which, if he was right, would be bound to result in other people defeating him because they now know his playbook and understand. There'll be people that can do it better than he can. So anyway, yeah, that's what he's saying. He's pointing out that there's a kind of silliness to claiming you've come up with the ultimate selfish philosophy and then explaining that philosophy to others in great detail so that they can take advantage of it. Which is
when he says he takes the greatest possible trouble to drill his enemies in war. What does drill mean in that sentence?
To train them.
Ah, okay.
So to when you drill soldiers,
he's actually trying to
they march around and you teach them. You have firing drills.
He's training his enemies to defeat him.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is, of course, so Nietzsche. I'm sure our listeners, almost all of them know him, but he's a late 19th century philosopher. Died in 1900. He was born in 1844, so he's only 56 years old or so. He's famous because Chesterton's going to go on about him for a while, so it's worth noting. He's very famous for his works Beyond Good and Evil, on the genealogy of morality, and Thus Spoke Zarathustra, or Thus Spake Zarathustra.
Well, they made like 17 movies in response to him saying God's dead.
Right, and that was on Beyond Good and Evil.
God's not dead.
Right, all the fundamentalist Christians.
And the Newsboys? Somebody made a song.
Cinematic response to it. Yep, exactly. So, and his main theories were that God, was an invention of people. Morality is an invention of the weak to shackle the strong. So by shaming them into doing things that they don't need to, and they could just take power because they're strong. I'm being deliberately simplistic about it, but in any case, and he was the one that first came up with the idea of the Übermensch that was in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, so the Superman that the Nazis latched onto, so his entire philosophy revolved around seizing power and having a strong enough will to do so, and to cast off the shackles of the morality imposed on you by others. And predictably, he died insane. So.
Did he kill himself, or he just went crazy and kind of just
there's some debate about whether he killed himself. Well, we know that he was in an increasing state of delirium. He had if you read his proclamations in the last few months of his life, it's wild. It's like it'll send you on. It would light up X. I can tell you that. He talks about things like carrying out the execution of all the Jews around him, and fun things like that. Talks about his conversations with various historical figures that were dead, and he's full on insane, and so then he dies shortly thereafter.
All right, well, let's continue this first paragraph.
But however it began, the view is common enough in current literature. The main defense of these thinkers is that they are not thinkers, they are makers. They say that choice is itself the divine thing. Thus, Mr. Bernard Shaw has attacked the old idea that men's acts are to be judged by the standard of the desire of happiness. He says that a man does not act for his happiness, but from his will. He does not say, jam will make me happy, but I want jam. And in all this, others follow him with yet greater enthusiasm. Mr. John Davidson, a remarkable poet, is so passionately excited about it that he is obliged to write prose. He publishes a short play with several long prefaces. This is natural enough in Mr. Shaw, for all his plays are prefaces. Mr. Shaw is, I suspect, the only man on earth who has never written any poetry. But that Mr. Davidson, who can write excellent poetry, should write instead laborious metaphysics in defense of this doctrine of will, does show that the doctrine of will has taken hold of men. Even Mr. H.G. Wells has half spoken in its language, saying that one should test acts not like a thinker, but like an artist, saying, I feel this curve is right, or that line shall go thus. They are all excited, and well they may be, for by this doctrine of the divine authority of will, they think they can break out of the doomed fortress of rationalism. They think they can escape.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, so here we're introduced to the second of the will to power folks, John Davidson, who is a Scottish poet turned philosopher. And in a weird twist of fate, John Davidson was going to commit suicide a year after Chesterton publishes this.
Oh,
I don't think there's any connection to the two. I don't think Orthodoxy caused his suicide, but he had just spent the last decade writing.
He did commit suicide, or he did?
He did. Davidson absolutely committed suicide.
Huh.
And took a while for his body to be found too. So they offered a reward of £20 for the body. But he was a more particular, whereas Nietzsche was he tried to knock down conventional wisdom, conventional religion, conventional theology in a sort of a big picture way, and then make a philosophy writ large. Davidson is more particular. He's very antagonistic. He has lots of very nasty things to say about people that are religious and laws that are based on religious laws and theology. And he intended to write his own philosophy basically about the love of money and mammon, or mammon as it's literarily been known. And but died before he finished that. So he has his last four works were these things called testaments, beginning with Testament of a Vivisector. A vivisector is someone that chops a body apart. So that's was a little gruesome, I suppose. And then finishing with his own testament, the Testament of John Davidson. But anyway, he was a little bit of a card. Chesterton liked his poetry, but he was definitely a follower of Nietzsche, even though Davidson denied that he was a follower of Nietzsche.
Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Shaw in there and Wells.
Yeah, we got Shaw, who we've talked about before. Shaw was famously a man of no imagination. He had no time for poetry or any such highfalutin things. That's Chesterton's taking a swipe at him, a gentle
He
swipe.
says all his plays are prefaces. What is it? What do you think he means by that? I've never read of.
So the preface of a play is not the heart of the.
Right,
it's just not the actors. It's just talking about the play, what the play is going to. So Shaw has no capacity for making art. He just can just.
Does he actually write plays, or is that a joke that he doesn't?
No, he's joking. I'm not aware, actually. Maybe he did, but I'm not aware of any. I've read a number of things from Shaw, and I haven't seen any plays from him. But basically, Chesterton's primary critique is in the second to last sentence. He says, "For by this doctrine of the divine authority of will, they think they can break out of the doomed fortress of rationalism." So Chesterton's playing on this idea, which everyone knew at his time, and most people don't know now, which is that this ancient view that man is a combination of a variety of powers. So we have the power to reason, the power to make choices or the will, and the irrational powers, the passions that by which we hate and love and all these other things. Although technically love is an act of the will, but the passions that go along with love and every other passion. So those are that's the traditional view. And Chesterton's pointing out that these guys, Nietzsche and his ilk, they were tired of the what they saw as the circle jerk of rationalists, and how the modern, especially the Germanic and English modern philosophers, got themselves in a sort of kind of toilet bowl swirl of never knowing whether they could know the truth, and always positing things in their head, and getting more and more confused. So Nietzsche thought he would just cut through all that silliness by saying it's not based upon the reason anymore; it's based upon the will. So that other power of the soul to make choices. And so we just have to make choices. And Chesterton's going to go on and talk about that a lot more in the next two paragraphs.
And that kind of a natural outflowing of kind of thinking that rationality, even, whatever these perceived things, even love or anything metaphysical is really a construct, right? Male and female, whatever, all these things are social constructs, or we've created them essentially. So if we just will things rather than, we can will it. We've done it. We didn't realize we did it, but now we've realized we've willed all these things into existence. So now we can take control and really will what we really want.
Now, that's a really good point. The idea of social constructs actually is itself an outgrowth of the Nietzschean will to power. It's we have created these. It's not that we've come to understand that man and woman are different. It's that we've created something.
Right. Whereby truths aren't found in the world. Like we don't find morality.
We don't discover. We don't know. We make
it. Right. Yeah. All right. We will continue.
But they cannot escape. This pure praise of volition ends in the same breakup and blank as the mere pursuit of logic. Exactly as complete free thought involves the doubting of thought itself, so the acceptation of mere willing really paralyzes the will. Mr. Bernard Shaw has not perceived the real difference between the old utilitarian test of pleasure, clumsy, of course, and easily misstated, and that which he propounds. The real difference between the test of happiness and the test of will is simply that the test of happiness is a test and the other isn't. You can discuss whether a man's act in jumping over a cliff was directed towards happiness. You cannot discuss whether it was derived from will. Of course it was. You can praise an action by saying that it is calculated to bring pleasure or pain, to discover truth or to save the soul. But you cannot praise an action because it shows will. For to say that is merely to say that it is an action. By this praise of will, you cannot really choose one course as better than another. And yet choosing one course as better than another is the very definition of the will you are praising.
Okay. My head's spinning on that a little bit.
Okay. So what he's pointing out is that those folks that, like Nietzsche and Davidson, who take this a worship of the will as the source of their philosophy. This is our cornerstone, our touchstone. We're gonna base everything on the idea that a thing is good if you will it, and it's bad if you don't. If you're forced into it, for example, if other people impose it on you, etc. So, but Chesterton is going to the deeper philosophy of willing itself and saying, look, when someone does a thing like jump off a cliff, or decide to take a certain train into town, the really interesting thing, and the only thing you can really analyze about the action being good or not, is whether it was, what was the motivation of it, what was he trying to do when he did it. If you praise an act of going on a train because it's your act, it's just your will, you just willed it. it's a very foolish thing, because everything that you choose to do or even not do is an act of your will. So
Right.
so there's nothing to praise or not praise. Everything, every time we take action, it's will. Okay. Now you can take an action and say, "Oh, I was forced to," but you weren't really forced to do something. Like you could have chosen. You decided to do it because you thought you didn't want the consequences if you chose something different. Like if you thought someone was going to, when I was a kid and I was in school and like I was going to get beat up by 3 guys if I didn't do something. So I had to hand over the paper or whatever it was, and that was an act of the will. That in itself, just being an act of the will, isn't good or bad. It's just you just willed it. That's what it is to be of a choice. The real only way we can apply value to a thing is by analyzing the reasons behind why someone did what they did, what they were trying to achieve, whether it did achieve it, etc. Those are the things that you can judge. Nothing is praiseworthy. So Chesterton says you can praise an action by saying that it is calculated to bring pleasure or pain or discover truth or save the soul. But you cannot praise an action because it shows will. For to say that is merely to say that it is an action. You just praise it. Okay. Like then in that case, everyone's actions are equally praiseworthy. Nobody's better or worse than any. No choice is better or worse. So
it's not like I'm praising the act of will because you chose, you chose to give that guy flowers instead of punch him in the face. But really, you would if you really praise will, you would praise each choice equally. It has
exactly. So the guy punches you. You punch a guy in the face. The Nietzschean has to say, "Well, that was a wonderful act of the will. Well done."
Yeah.
And then
the definition of
will is in
is
the exact same situation. You give him flowers, or you go whimpering away. Then the Nietzschean would have to say, "Well done. That was a great act of the will that you just did that." Like if he's being consistent,
right?
And so this is Chesterton's pointing out the fatal flaw, just like you can point out fairly simply the fatal flaw in skeptics, in that they insist that there are no universal truths, except the fact that there are no universal truths. They insist that you accept that fact, but then which then denies all other facts. But they have no reason for that. They just want you to do it. So in the same way, the fatal flaw of Nietzschean will to power types is also fairly simple. It's just that they have no cause for admiring acts of the will, because everything's an act of the will. There's nothing to admire or to criticize. It's why you did what you did, or whether you could criticize an act because of the end that you were seeking, or that you carried out by it. That's something you could admire or criticize.
Let's keep moving here. Let's will to the next paragraph.
The worship of will is the negation of will. To admire mere choice is to refuse to choose. If Mr. Bernard Shaw comes up to me and says, "Will something," that is tantamount to saying, "I do not mind what you will." And that is tantamount to saying, "I have no will in the matter." You cannot admire will in general, because the essence of will is that it is particular. A brilliant anarchist like Mr. John Davidson feels an irritation against ordinary morality, and therefore he invokes will to anything. He only wants humanity to want something, but humanity does want something. It wants ordinary morality. He rebels against the law and tells us to will something or anything. But we have willed something. We have willed the law against which he rebels.
And A.I. Chesterton in the second lesson should have said, the emphasis should have been, but we have willed something. We have willed the law against which he rebels. So he's here criticizing the fact that Davidson, in this particular case, or Shaw, just want you to will something. And what they really mean by it, to be fair, Chesterton's playing a little coy here. What they really mean by it is, choose something for yourself. Stop just following what other people tell you to do. Will something, will anything, but break free of the chains. But he's pointing out, look, you can't just admire the general willing of something. It matters what they will, And
Mm-hmm.
and in particular, what if people will to follow a moral code that you don't like that is a moral code that is opposed to randomly willing things as a basis for morality?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the other problems of the will to power folks, is that they're easily hoisted by their own petard, as Chesterton's pointing out here, because you could destroy a will to power guy by just getting a bunch of people together and say, yeah, we will to not follow random will but to follow stated morality and as a path to the future. And then all of a sudden, and we will to believe that God is not dead, that God was never dead, and we didn't invent him. Well, according to Nietzsche, that choice, according to Bernard Shaw, according to Davidson, that choice to will ordinary morality or religious principles is just as valid as theirs. So they have no argument against it, as long as there's enough of us and we have the will to power, or we do it more effectively, or whatever the case may be. So anyway, he's pointing out a variety of flaws, and this one is the hoisted by your own petard thing. When someone starts willing something that you don't like.
Okay, we'll keep moving.
All the will worshippers, from Nietzsche to Mr. Davidson, are really quite empty of volition. They cannot will, they can hardly wish. And if anyone wants a proof of this, it can be found quite easily. It can be found in this fact, that they always talk of will as something that expands and breaks out. But it is quite the opposite. Every act of will is an act of self-limitation. To desire action is to desire limitation. In that sense, every act is an act of self-sacrifice. When you choose anything, you reject everything else. That objection, which men of this school used to make to the act of marriage, is really an objection to every act. Every act is an irrevocable selection and exclusion. Just as when you marry one woman, you give up all the others. So when you take one course of action, you give up all the other courses. If you become King of England, you give up the post of beadle in Brompton. If you go to Rome, you sacrifice a rich, suggestive life in Wimbledon. It is the existence of this negative or limiting side of will that makes most of the talk of the anarchic will worshippers little better than nonsense. For instance, Mr. John Davidson tells us to have nothing to do with thou shalt not. But it is surely obvious that thou shalt not is only one of the necessary corollaries of I will. I will go to the Lord Mayor's show, and thou shalt not stop me.
Stop there.
Yeah, that's a stop.
This is a really cool observation. I don't know. Did you pick up on what he's trying to say about it?
My best interpretation is that they act like the will is this thing that really make. Well, I guess the will is in their way. Or they were saying exercising your will is making choices, and that this will to power is that you have all these choices in front of you, and really, when you make a choice, you're denying all these other choices. And I think he's defending that. Eventually, he's kind of saying like that's the. Like he goes further down here and he talks about. He gets into it more. We're halfway through the paragraph, so
right,
more to it than that.
yeah, but I really like that. It's truly interesting how, at least when I was reading it, I was thinking, wow, we don't think of will that way, as a narrowing of choices, but truly that is what it is. Like you decide what you finish a dinner for the night and you have a couple hours ahead of you, and you think about what it is. What could I do tonight? Should I do a podcast, for example? Should I spend time with the kids? Should I go out for dessert with my wife? Should I do something? There's all sorts of possibilities, but none of those possibilities. The fact that there's all those possibilities, that's not will. That's just the realm of reality. And then by acting with your will, you limit yourself to only one of them. And even if you choose none of them, you're like, I don't want to limit myself. Well, you just chosen to do nothing. And so so no matter what happens, you choose to limit and create a boundary where you've chosen one thing and excluded everything else. So far from the will to power and the worship of will expanding one's horizons, if you worship will, you're really worshiping the limitation of your horizons, which is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's about to take on anarchism for a paragraph. So John Davidson was a kind of anarchist too. Nietzsche was not so much an anarchist, although his philosophy leads one to a kind of anarchy. But Davidson was.
All right. Yeah, this will be the last of this episode. Here we go.
Anarchism adjures us to be bold, creative artists and care for no laws or limits. But it is impossible to be an artist and not care for laws and limits. Art is limitation. The essence of every picture is the frame. If you draw a giraffe, you must draw him with a long neck. If, in your bold, creative way, you hold yourself free to draw a giraffe with a short neck, you will really find that you are not free to draw a giraffe. The moment you step into the world of facts, you step into a world of limits. You can free things from alien or accidental laws, but not from the laws of their own nature. You may, if you like, free a tiger from his bars, but do not free him from his stripes. Do not free a camel of the burden of his hump. You may be freeing him from being a camel. Do not go about as a demagogue, encouraging triangles to break out of the prison of their three sides. If a triangle breaks out of its three sides, its life comes to a lamentable end. Somebody wrote a work called The Loves of the Triangles. I never read it, but I'm sure that if triangles ever were loved, they were loved for being triangular. This is certainly the case with all artistic creation, which is in some ways the most decisive example of pure will. The artist loves his limitations. They constitute the thing he is doing. The painter is glad that the canvas is flat. The sculptor is glad that the clay is colorless.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true as an artist?
Yeah, I mean, I think artists don't want to admit that up front, but I do know that. I mean, I get frozen up by too many options and choices, especially when writing. Writing, I have a much harder time. Drawing, I can visualize what I want to draw, and I can just start laying it out. Usually, a few tries if I have to, but you're always blocking out, where this is going to go. That's going to go. Limitations, and you know what you're not going to do. Writing, the hardest thing is it's a constant. Your characters are choosing different paths, and finding. Yeah, it's if the full art form is finding all the boundaries of where this is going to not go. You're going to pick these paths, and you're going to limit your characters to this road.
Right.
If you can make it seem natural, like they didn't mean to go down that road, that's much better writing. But yeah.
I totally agree. I'm not an artist, but I have a couple folks in my family that are, and they feel the same way. The selection of the limitations prior to the art piece, how big is it going to be? What is it going to consist of in a general sense? In other words, when you start drawing a picture, they don't imagine that they're just going to keep drawing or painting that picture continuously forever in a direction, for example, or in all directions. They limit themselves by the frame itself, by the idea of what they're creating, and it's, I do find it hilarious though, the aside about the loves of the triangles part, and then do not, in his line, I think my favorite one in this paragraph, in this episode, is, do not go about as a demagogue encouraging triangles to break out of the prison of their three sides. If a triangle breaks out of its three sides, its life comes to a lamentable end. And for some reason, my there's a picture in my head of like some psychopathic triangle, like convincing other triangles to break free of their triangleness, and then watching as they explode and die.
Yeah.
It's like some geometric
Be
drama.
free of your three sides. Yeah.
Be free, and they just die, or they become something else. They become a square. Don't become a square.
They become a square. They're a tortured, broken triangle, really. But they force their
There's
body.
Too many sides. It's too big. So that's it. It's as as is often the case, Chesterton's wit comes in these one-liners sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But basically what he's saying here is, look, things have natures. Part of the nature of a giraffe is to have a long neck. And if you imagine that you're so free that you can draw giraffes with a short neck, you will find that you have not drawn a giraffe, basically. You've drawn some other creature that looks like a giraffe, but with a short neck. and so same thing with a camel without a hump, or a triangle without three sides. So there, if you break the nature of a thing, well, you aren't free to have a thing and break its nature at the same time, I guess. And so your anarchism has to have limits. It can't be the way anarchists imagine their philosophy to be, which is the most free. And anarchists of today are the hardcore libertarians. These are the people that say, like, you can do anything with certain very specific limits, very small, very specific limits. They're not the bomb throwing kind of anarchists, like there were in the late 1900s and early 20th century.
Like in The Man Who Was Thursday, the Dynamiters. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, it isn't The Man Who Was Thursday, although.
That's right. Sorry, I didn't mean for this guy to interrupt.
No, we'll get there one day. We'll get to Man Who Was Thursday, but today is not that day.
This is not that day. Can I get a witness? Well, don't forget to join us on Patreon. You get the episodes early, usually. Some exclusive content on there. You can be part of our community, little Discord, little commenting, get essays you can comment on, discuss with other members or talk to us. Just be part of a Chesterton community. It's cool. Be one of the cool kids.
All I could say to that
Chesterton's Gateway
Amen.
is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity, Amazon.com. Send questions and comments to chestertonsgateway@gmail.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
Take care, all. This is beautiful.
Patient.
Love it.